The train's last whistle shrieked through the cold morning air, long and lonely, before it faded into silence. Steam curled upward, twisting into the pale dawn sky as the wheels clattered into the distance, shrinking smaller and smaller until only the faint echo remained. Then there was nothing. No sound but the wind scraping across the empty platform. Amelia stood there, shivering, her boots sinking into the gaps between the old wooden boards. In her arms, the baby cried, softly at first, then louder, a desperate wail that tore through the stillness. She clutched him closer, her arms trembling from exhaustion. She didn't even know his name. Didn't know her own last name either. The note pinned to her dress said only, Amelia. Whoever had written it hadn't cared enough to say more. Her memory was a fog. Faces without names, voices without words, shadows that disappeared when she tried to reach for them. She remembered waking up on the train, the baby tucked beside her in a worn basket, the motion of the wheels beneath them, the smell of coal and dust. And then the whistle, the sudden stop, and everyone leaving until she was the only one left behind. The sign above her head creaked in the wind, Whisper Creek Station. The letters were faded and chipped, as if time had forgotten this place too. Across the tracks, a stray dog barked and ran off into the open fields. The land stretched endlessly, miles of brown grass, rolling hills, and the faint shimmer of mountains in the distance. Amelia took a shaky breath, trying to calm the baby. Shish, she whispered. It's all right. We'll be all right. But her own voice broke halfway through. She didn't believe it. She had nowhere to go, no food, and not even a coin in her pocket. The thin shawl around her shoulders barely kept the wind out, and her fingers were already numb. Inside the small station building, an old man sat behind a dusty window, dozing beside a telegraph machine. A single lantern flickered weakly beside him. Amelia thought about going inside, maybe asking for help, but her courage faltered. What would she say? That she had no name, no home, and no past. That someone had left her with a baby she couldn't feed. People would look at her like a stranger, or worse, a problem to be rid of. So she stayed outside. The only other soul on the platform was a man sitting on a bench a few yards away. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long duster coat and a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. A cowboy, she guessed. His boots were dusty, his spurs catching bits of the morning light. He didn't move, didn't even glance her way, just sat there with quiet stillness, like he belonged to the land itself. Amelia rocked the baby gently, but he wouldn't stop crying. She felt panic rise in her chest. Please, please, she murmured, don't cry. She looked around, desperate for help, for anyone. But the old man inside hadn't moved, and the cowboy was still as stone. Finally, her knees gave way. She sank onto an old wooden crate, pulling the child close. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. She couldn't cry, not now. That was when the cowboy stirred. Slowly, he stood up and walked toward her. Each step echoed softly on the wooden boards, measured, calm, and unhurried. Amelia's breath caught. She didn't know whether to feel afraid or relieved. He stopped a few feet away, his shadow falling across her. You lost, ma'am. His voice was deep, low, and steady. She looked up, startled by how gentle his tone was. His face was rough with sun and time, his eyes a calm gray that reminded her of a quiet river. She opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. I don't know, she finally whispered. I woke up on the train with this baby. There was a note, but it doesn't say much. Just, Amelia. He nodded slowly, as if weighing every word. Then he glanced toward the horizon where the train had vanished. That's a hard way to start a morning, he said quietly. World's a rough place for someone without a name. Rougher still for a baby without one. She swallowed, looking down at the child in her arms. I don't even know who he belongs to, she said. I just can't leave him. Something softened in the man's eyes. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a small tin cup, and poured some milk from a flask. Here, he said, holding it out. Ain't much, but better than nothing. There's a sheriff's office down the road. You can rest there till you figure things out. Amelia hesitated, then took the milk with a trembling hand. Thank you, she whispered. He tipped his hat slightly, a quiet gesture that somehow said more than words. Name's Luke Carter, he said. Got a ranch a few miles west, Red River. If you need work or a place to stay, you can ask for me." She looked up at him, the baby now nursing weakly from the cup. "Why are you helping me?" Luke's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Figure someone helped me once when I didn't deserve it. Guess I'm paying that debt forward." Before she could respond, he turned and started walking down the dirt road, his boots leaving deep prints in the dust. He didn't look back, didn't wait for thanks. He just disappeared into the golden light spilling across the fields. Amelia watched him go until the wind swallowed his figure. Then she looked down at the baby, his eyes half closed, his breathing soft now. For a long time, she just sat there, the world silent except for the faint hum of the wind. Maybe it was foolish, but in that moment, something inside her shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it lessened. The emptiness didn't feel so endless. For the first time since she could remember, she wasn't completely alone. She adjusted the baby's blanket and whispered, "We'll find our way, little one." Somehow, the clouds above drifted apart, letting through a strip of warm sunlight that fell across the platform, touching her face. She closed her eyes and let it soak in. Somewhere out there, beyond the tracks and the endless land, a man named Luke Carter had given her a direction, however small. The rain had started before dawn, slow and steady, tapping against the tin roof of the little cabin the sheriff had let her stay in. By morning, it had turned into a storm, cold, merciless, and loud. Water seeped through the cracks in the ceiling and down the wooden walls, dripping onto the floor where puddles gathered. Amelia huddled near the dying fire, holding the baby against her chest, trying to keep him warm. His small body was burning with fever, and every tiny cough made her heart twist. She had been in Whisper Creek for 3 days now. The sheriff had given her shelter and a loaf of bread, but no one had asked many questions. The townsfolk looked at her with suspicion, whispering about the strange girl who'd come off the train with no name and a baby that wasn't hers. She could feel their stares each time she went outside for water or tried to buy milk with the few coins someone had left in her pocket. It didn't take long for her to realize she wasn't welcome. Now, as the rain poured harder, she felt that same loneliness closing in again. The cabin was small, just a single room with a bed, a stove, and a window that rattled in the wind. The baby, she had started calling him Ben, though she didn't know why, whimpered softly. She brushed a damp strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "We'll be all right, Ben. I promise." But her own voice trembled. When the fire gave one last flicker and died, the cold crept in fast. She tried to relight it, but the wood was too wet. Smoke filled the air, stinging her eyes. That was when she knew she couldn't stay there any longer. The baby needed warmth, food, something she couldn't give him alone. And there was only one person she could think of who might help. Luke Carter, the silent cowboy who had offered her kindness when everyone else turned away. He hadn't said much, but his eyes had told her something she couldn't quite name: steady, certain, safe. She remembered the way he'd handed her the tin of milk without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He hadn't asked who she was or where she came from. He had just helped. She pulled her shawl tighter around herself, wrapped the baby in the dry blanket she'd been saving, and stepped outside. The rain hit her face like cold needles. The muddy road stretched before her, slick and uneven. The wind howled through the trees, but she kept walking, one slow step at a time, clutching Ben close to her chest. The journey to the Red River Ranch felt endless. The mud clung to her boots, making each step heavier than the last. Her clothes were soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, but she didn't stop. The storm grew wilder as she crossed the open fields, the sky splitting with flashes of lightning. Somewhere in the distance, she saw the faint glow of a lantern, a flicker of hope. By the time she reached the ranch gate, her legs were trembling, her breath shallow. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet as she pushed through. The house stood sturdy against the storm, its windows glowing with warm light. She stumbled up the porch steps, water dripping from her clothes, and knocked weakly on the door. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain. Then the door creaked open. Luke stood there, hat tilted, a lantern in his hand. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, soaked, shivering, clutching the baby. He didn't speak right away, he didn't have to. He simply reached out and took Ben from her arms with a gentleness that made her knees buckle with relief. "Come on in," he said quietly. His voice was steady, the kind of calm that steadies everything around it. Inside, the warmth of the fire hit her like sunlight. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee, and the air was soft compared to the storm outside. Luke placed the baby in a cradle near the hearth and handed her a blanket. "You're half frozen," he muttered. "Sit by the fire before you fall over." Amelia sank into a chair, too exhausted to speak. Her hands shook as she held the blanket tighter. She watched as Luke checked the baby, his movements careful and sure. He fed Ben a little milk from a bottle, then turned to her with a faint smile. "He's strong," he said. "Fighting type." A weak laugh escaped her. "Takes after you, maybe." He looked at her, surprised by the words, then gave a small shrug. "Maybe." Silence settled between them, comfortable in its own way. The fire cracked softly, the storm growled beyond the windows, and for the first time in days, Amelia felt the tightness in her chest ease just a little. After a while, Luke sat down across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "You said you didn't have a name," he said quietly. "Still true." She nodded, eyes downcast. "Just Amelia." That's all the note said. "I don't remember anything else." He was silent for a moment, then spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "You got somewhere you want to go?" She shook her head slowly. "Nowhere to go. No one waiting." Luke's gaze softened. He stood up, went to a shelf, and pulled down a tin mug. "You know," he said, pouring coffee, "this world's got plenty of folks trying to forget who they are. Maybe starting fresh ain't such a bad thing." She looked up, puzzled. "Starting fresh." He set the mug in front of her and met her eyes. "You said, you don't have a name," he said gently. "Well, you do now." Amelia blinked. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, that quiet, unhurried smile she'd seen before. "You're Amelia Carter now," he said simply. "And that little one, Ben Carter. If you're staying, I'll make sure no one in this town calls you anything else." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She stared at him, her heart pounding. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Luke looked into the fire for a long moment before answering. "Don't need to. You showed up in a storm, carrying a child that wasn't yours, and didn't give up on him. That tells me enough." Tears filled her eyes. For days she'd felt invisible, unwanted, a ghost in someone else's world. But now, in this quiet room filled with the warmth of fire and the sound of rain softening outside, someone had seen her. Really seen her. She reached for the mug, her hands still trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. He tipped his hat slightly, the ghost of a smile on his lips. "Ain't no need for thanks. Just take care of the boy, and yourself. That'll be enough." The baby stirred then, letting out a small cry. Luke lifted him, rocking him gently until he quieted again. Watching him, Amelia felt something bloom deep inside her, a warmth she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Outside, the storm finally began to fade, leaving only the soft sound of rain on the roof. The firelight danced across Luke's face as he placed the baby back in the cradle and turned to her. "Welcome home," he said.